What's up, guys? Max Finn here with another episode of the Unicorn Perspective, and it's funny. Rich now, like this is the second time he's helped me out and done a favor for me. We did our first episode a while ago, and I think it's our most downloaded episode. And and then like a few weeks ago, somebody bailed on us last minute. I hit him up and was like, "Hey man, can you hop on?" And I actually ended up hopping on his live stream for 2 hours. And then I did it again yesterday and said, okay, somebody messed up again. Can you help me out? And I was able to convince him to actually come back into our ecosystem and do it. So it's not in his live stream; it's over here. And I have no idea what we're going to chat about. So we're just going to have a conversation. Rich asked me before. He's like, dude, what are we going to talk about today? I was like, I don't know. This was last minute. I know I need to record something. And I said, anytime we have a conversation, which is usually, at least once a week, stuff comes out of it. Golden stuff comes out of it. So I'm excited for us to chat. More so for me, just selfishly, and then I'm sure stuff will come out of it for our audience.
So, is this the last podcast that you're recording before you are a father?
It could be. It possibly could be. I become a father while we're having a podcast. So it's it's a weird thing, right? The whole like when you get to that final stage, because
Right.
it could have it's not like a fixed thing where it says it's going to happen at this hour. It's like it's this window of time, and we have an induction date which is the 11th. So if he doesn't come by then that's the definitive date. We were hoping for 10-10-20, so that would have been really good, 10-10-20-20, but we got 10-11-2020, which is it's almost as good. So yeah, this could be the last one before that, which is exciting as well. It's a good person to have on for that.
Yeah. The interesting thing is that, and we can go any which way you want the conversation to go, but your answer reminded me of the way we used to do product launches. And what's interesting is that when Jeff Walker first developed like product launch formula, there was no four video approach. That came much later. And so in the beginning, it was all product launch formula was three phases, like the whisper campaign, the pre-launch and launch, right? Um, at that time, post-launch wasn't really looked at that closely, and all you did was have a set of tactics that you were looking to deploy over that period of time. And what reminded me of it was that we didn't really have like a specific launch date. We had a launch like window where we were going to probably be launching. But since the whole idea of the launch was to get a conversation going between you and the marketplace, it was much less structured than the way product launches are now. People didn't know that they were in a product launch, for one. Like they had no idea, right? And and we were ready to put the product on sale, like when we had hit all the notes and dotted all the i's and crossed all the t's. And so we would always have like a planned launch date, but we never went, like that never happened,
Yeah.
and for others as well. And those kind of launches were actually more effective. However, nowadays, I guess you got two competing things. One, there's just a lot more noise online. You're competing with a lot more people. So the idea of having like a launch that lasts a month or a month and a half, where you're holding people's attention for that long, is probably close to non-existent. It's just so much harder to do. Um, so that's one. And then two, obviously getting partners to mail, kind of difficult when you don't have locked in dates, when the world has become more organized, disciplined, and systematized. So, but those were some of my very favorite type of marketing campaigns, because it really was stimulating a conversation. You knew how you were starting, but you had no idea where you were going, and where the endpoint was, and what people's reactions were going to be as you got closer to that. So you woke up each day like just excited about what the day was going to, uh, unveil, and then based on what the crowd was saying to you, then you would then go back and move that conversation a little bit closer to where you needed it to go. So just cool. It's like a baby, I guess.
That is a great story to be able to pull that from expecting a baby is great. It made me think of something though while you were saying that. Do you think it's easier or harder today for marketers, like, and just in I'll get a little more specific. You're talking about Jeff and the product launch formula, and I feel like there are so many kind of legends in our industry who started in the early days of internet marketing and kind of built these fundamental systems, these foundational systems and principles that seem to be the basis for most strategies. And I feel like there's far less innovation. It's almost that thing where you feel like, hey, everything's already been invented. So what am I going to invent? Right. And so I feel like you have a lot of marketers now that they're just variations of the same handful of, campaign types. And I'm curious if you think like when Jeff and the guys that have done so well and paved the road for a lot of us, was it easier back then, or do you think it's easier now?
I think I think it's easier now. Um, I know a lot of people might disagree with me on that, so I'll explain why I think it's
Yeah.
easier now. But I think it's easier now, primarily because there are so many more people online, for one. Two, there are so many different tools online that in the past, like pre-ClickFunnels, right? I think you met my friend Mars, the guy that was in charge of production.
Yep.
I had told him a year before ClickFunnels that he should develop some kind of software for funnels, right? And because he primarily worked in launches, and launches are just complicated funnels, in my opinion. And but back then, my ability to be able to put up a funnel in a day was a competitive advantage. Like I had a team, right? Like we could knock that stuff out. So, nowadays you don't need a team to create a funnel. You don't need so many things that were needed back then, and there are so many more options. So I think it's easier today. I think it's harder for a one man show today because there are so many skill sets and there are so many things. It's easier, I would say, in general, but now you might need a team as opposed to an individual. But the results will be comparable as far as if there's more people, more money will be made, if done correctly. Um, but there's also, I would say that there's this like, I don't know if I would balance this with what I'm saying, but it feels like I should. That when Jeff Walker developed product launch formula, he developed it. Geez, I don't know, 2002, three, like somewhere in that time frame. Um, and he worked on it for years, right? Like delivering the course, refining the course, delivering the course, refining the course, and you don't see a lot of that at all anymore. You didn't see
Yeah.
a lot of it then. I'm reminded of a guy that has nothing to do with the marketing space, Tiago Fort, who I'm a fan of. Went through his course, Build a Second Brain,
Second brain. Yeah.
and yeah, and he does that. Like he's continually refining that course, and it's interesting, like how many people have become exposed to that because like he's got something good and he's now like taking it as far as he can go, as opposed to developing another course and developing the back end of that course, and then that and so on and so forth.
And I think that's
So
great. Like just to pause, 'cause that's a really great point. I was talking to Adrian last week, Adrian Morrison. We were catching up. We haven't spoken in a while, and we were just shooting the shit. Like, hey, what are you up to? What are you up to?
right.
And he was like, man, I'm doing the same thing that I've been doing since 2015. He has ESA, and he's like, it just works. It just makes a lot of money. I've referred like 90,000 people to Shopify, and it's true. Like I think there's a lot to be said for people finding something that works and just continuing to improve that thing and bring in new people. There's never going to be a shortage of people that want to start an e-com store or want to learn how to manage their knowledge, but there is this. this approach in our industry now where it's like new course, just like teach something new every few months and try to resell the same customers instead of perfecting and improving something that already works. It's just interesting use of that because I was having the same type of conversations the last few weeks.
Yeah, it also I think depends on the type of person you are.
Yeah.
You know, I am very much aware that most of the money is made by sticking to something long enough to reap and harvest. Um, Unfortunately, that's not my MO. That's not what makes me happy. I had this one conversation one night late with Jay Abraham, and he was comparing the acquisition of knowledge and skill uh, for him, and he was saying he thought it applied to me too. Like it's a one night stand. We want to take it back to our room. We want to have our way with it. We want to like dominate it, understand it, do whatever nasty stuff we want to do with it, and then like be done with it and move on to the next conquest. And and I certainly am victim of that too. Like that's my preferred way. Like after I taught well, after I wrote like the reports about attention, that put me and Gary Vaynerchuk on the same page and we became close friends. But then Gary stuck with attention and like that was his primary thing. And I moved on to theory of constraints. And then after theory of constraints, I moved on to something else and I moved on to something else. And one of the reasons why I wanted to do the deal with Agora was primarily one was so that we could grow a big information publishing company, and but the other reason was is that I had more confidence that potentially there would be more people around to harvest what I already created when I moved on to the next thing. Because yeah, I mean the whole idea of a cash cow in business is that's you never get to cash cow if you are always in the startup and the growth stage.
Yep.
And so yeah, unfortunately for me, and I don't know if that's an ADD quality or something else. Um, I'm always interested in the next new thing that I can do, as opposed to doing the same thing. I used to have a slide. I used to have a post-it note under my monitor that was that said "Teach what you know," because more often than not, whenever I have a teaching opportunity, I decide I want to learn something, and there's no better time to teach it than while I'm learning it, because then I'll learn it better. Of course, that makes creating presentations a lot more difficult than just putting in what I already know. But then I'm leveraging it, for education as well. What about you? Do you find it easy to stick to something once? Like, are you a routine guy? Because I thrive in routine, but I will do everything in my power to mess that routine up.
Yeah, it's a great point. Like I'm very similar in that I know I should be super focused on a singular thing and just focus, focus, focus. And anytime I've done that, I've done very well. But like my nature is that I just get really bored of one thing. Like even lately with Facebook ads, it's been very good to me. I've been able to build a name for myself because of Facebook ads and getting very specific on that. But it's such a small piece of a one thing. It's a piece of digital marketing, which is a piece of something bigger, which is a piece of something bigger. And I'm interested in up here. And we talk about this a lot, like in our conversations. I'm always asked, hey, what books do you have on this? What books do you have on this? Because there's only so much that you can learn and teach about a single topic, in my opinion. Like it's obviously new stuff happens and there's new features and bells and whistles and trends, but at the end of the day, it's one thing and it can get boring doing it a while. So I'm always like, oh, I want to try this. I want to try this and do this. But it's a balancing act of that's what fulfills me and I enjoy doing that, but also being realistic and saying, well, I need to get focused because the business does better and everyone does better when I'm not chasing these golden squirrels that are running everywhere and
Right.
trying to get them, right? It's
So how do
yeah.
you do you have time set aside each day for that kind of stuff? Do you like only spend time on the fun things after you've done a certain amount of work, or is it pretty haphazard? Like how do you do it?
I've had to start adding a lot more like forced structure in my day, and force myself to do certain things and really remind myself, even just visually on like note boards and stuff, to not do certain things because it's just such a bad habit, and retraining that and relearning and change your behavior is really, really difficult. Um, Honestly, I've started implementing some of the stuff that you've talked about, which is, I think it's like 3 or 5 seconds you talk about all the time. Where, and this was a great piece of advice. You gave this to me probably early on when we started talking. You said, "There's a lot of stuff that I do every day that I don't want to do, but I
Right.
find that if I force myself to do it for like 5 seconds, whatever the number is, that I usually then continue doing it." It's that one act of starting it that is so challenging. But if you just look at it as like, just do it for a few seconds or just do it for whatever, and that's your goal, instead of like, hey, I'm going to go bike for an hour, I'm going to go get on my bike and ride it for, a minute or whatever.
Yeah, I was actually just reminded of that too because I hadn't been writing in my journal every day, and and then so I was writing every couple of days, and I was writing in there like I guess on Monday, and I was saying like, oh, I haven't been writing in here as much, and I was reminded of the fact that of what you're talking about, and the way I kind of talk to myself about that is I can't make a decision whether or not I want to do something until I'm actually doing it, because if not, the answer is always no.
Yeah.
Right? Like I don't want to do anything. I'm lazy, and like unless it's a lot of fun, I don't want to do it. So the answer is always going to be no. So that can't be the decision point. I have to start it, and then I can decide. Like it like um and I don't know if everyone has the same. Like I find personally that task initiation is the is my obstacle, right? Like once I get started with something, I don't jump off it that quickly. It's really in the start. And it's funny. Like I don't know if you go through this, but I go through times where I just like forget the stuff that works for me, and then I'm reminded of it, and I'm like, why the hell did I stop doing that? Like, how did I
Yeah.
forget that? Like I went unconscious for a time. So yeah, I get that. And then, you know, but I thrive. Like, and I wonder if you do too. Like, if I wake up at this, it doesn't mean I do it right now. I'm not. Wake up at the same time every day, work out at the same time every day, like, all slotted. I find that when I'm doing that, I'm most productive. However, I always mess it up.
Yeah.
Like, I always mess it up.
I'm the same way. It's if I stick to that structure and that routine, and I get a few days going, that kind of streak where I'm doing all those things, yeah, you get into that state where you're just, things are working, these things are lining up. Um, but it's challenging, and I don't know if this could be just a generalization that I have, but I feel like just from the comments I read, and seeing people interact in groups with other influencers, there's this assumption that people think that like the top people in these industries are like super aggressive, that they are always working, and they love to work, and that they just love waking up early, they love doing all these things. Most of the guys that I know that are very successful think the exact same way, which is like, I'm lazy. Like I don't want to do things most days. Um, but the difference is you find ways to most effectively operate knowing your weaknesses, right? It's like understanding that, hey, I'm not the type of person that's going to like force myself to get out of bed at 5 in the morning. I'm not just going to naturally do that, where it's, I'm out of bed at 5 in the morning and I don't need coffee, and I can go all day long, and I can shoot content all day, and I can work, and I can multitask, and it's 2 a.m. and I'm still working. Like the kind of Gary V. Like people see Gary, and it's like, hey, all A player entrepreneurs must operate like that, where it's just all day nonstop. It's like you got an IV of espresso and cocaine going into your veins, and that's natural. And for a lot of people I know, at least, like it's not natural. Like it doesn't organically happen. It's just you got to figure out how to best set up your day and structure your routine, knowing that you're probably not the most aggressive, kind of outgoing person that's going to push themselves that hard.
Yeah, the oh geez. The
I know something good's coming because whenever you do this, whenever you're thinking, it's something
No,
usually
I had
good comes
something
out of it.
good, and then I had something good, and my daughter just texted me telling me that school's over because cheers canceled. Um, Let me just tell her on a podcast
And you just made me lose my really good
will
idea.
be done in about 30 to 40 minutes. Let me know what you want to do. The Sorry about that.
No, it's fine.
I'm playing Mr. Mom right now. You'll have to deal with this in like 15 years.
I'm good.
The What was the last thing you said? Because I remember the topic, but there was something you said that
I was talking
what
about
was
like people assuming that you're like Gary V, where he's just working 24/7. So most of us aren't naturally like that, and it's you got to structure your day and position yourself around those
right.
weaknesses so you get your work done and can be as productive as possible, knowing that you're like not going to hop out of bed at 5 in the morning naturally, and just ready to conquer the day.
Yeah, there was a thought there, and I've
We'll
totally
come back to
lost
it.
it. But what I would say is that um, you really got to understand how you yourself work and what are the fun things what are the easy things, what are the difficult things. For Gary, being the way Gary is, that's easy for him. So that might be like media buying for you or reading for me or uh but him sitting down and writing was extremely difficult for him back then, at least. I don't know if it's still the same. So I think it's partly that. I do agree that most people like think that others have it more figured out.
Yeah.
That's for sure. Um, in addition to that, I think that I really am a fan of for people who can't seem to get shit going. Um, uh, what Neil Fiore, there was a book I was going to recommend to you. Okay, now I remember what I was going to say. So I'm going to go back to,
Let's do it. Neil
I'm going to
Fury.
put Neil Fiore on the side here for a second. I'm just going to make a note. And you ever read the book The Slight Edge?
I haven't, but I'm going to now.
Okay, yeah, it's a really good book. It's a self-help book. I don't recommend a lot of those. Um, and the gist of it is of The Slight Edge, which I totally agree with 100%. I might I certainly thought that way before I read that book. I think that book helped like articulate certain beliefs I had that I operated under, but I couldn't necessarily articulate. One is that we are everything. Nothing is static, right? Everything is either trending one way or the other, right?
Yep.
You're either getting healthier right now or you're getting less healthy. You're getting richer right now or less rich, but you're not going to be the exact same level of wealth in a week from now. You're just not, right?
Yep.
It's not same with health, same with everything. So everything is either trending downward or trending upward. And success in life is based on a lot of small things that are done consistently. Those small things are easy to do and they're easy not to do. They're these aren't dramatic things, right? But it's these but recognizing that when you don't do those easy things, what the trend now starts to shift, right? So it's all he calls it the slight edge because it's all about recognizing that it is all those little things that add up and it's those little decisions like compounded and they're easy to do and they're easy not to do, like that's the whole point. That's why not everybody does them. um I mean, because like let's say waking up at 6 a.m. every day, that's not hard.
No.
It's not like it's easy, like in the grand scheme of things, right? It's not like climbing Mount Kilimanjaro or something. So yeah, it was a really I found it to be a like soul searching kind of distinction that if like I wouldn't, I'd be dishonest if I said that I thought that way all the time. I will, though I wish I did, because I think I'd operate more effectively. But it certainly is one of those that if you internalize everything is based on momentum and you're either taking away from it or adding to it at every given moment, it kind of helps, right? The other thing though that I was going to say, and you might be able to identify with this, you might not. I'm able to identify with it, I think, now more than I was when I was younger, only because my primary motivation strategy when up until like I was 40, was primarily an away from. Like, I didn't work out to have a six pack. I worked out so I'm not fat.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and that was always much more. I made money so I wouldn't be poor, but I didn't really have an income goal of X and wanted, a vision. I was more running away from
You just
living in
knew
a
where you didn't want
van
to
by
be.
the river.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the van down by the river.
Yeah. Now the challenge with that motivation strategy, at least for me, and I've heard it is for others as well, is that motivation strategy can be very powerful. However, as you get further away from what you're running away from, it becomes less and less powerful, right? So the thinner I am, the harder that motivation is to not be fat, because I'm so far away from being fat. I can actually eat pretty shitty for a while until that reality of being fat again happens, right? Um, so so the away from doesn't really help as much for me now, because I feel pretty safe in a lot of areas, right? So Neil Fiore wrote this book called The Now Habit, and it's kind of a cult classic. And it's a cult classic, and I know about it because I've looked at books like The Now Habit that became cult classics that are in the same vein of E-Myth and Getting Things Done.
Yeah.
So if you look at E-Myth and Getting Things Done, they both like greet the reader by saying like, hey, I know you've got problems and you're really struggling with whatever, but the way that you're going about it is completely wrong, and here's the real problem, right? So Getting Things Done was that information, we all are knowledge workers now, and so like the whole game changes. And with E-Myth, it's like you think your problems are X, Y, and Z, but it's just a systems problem, right? You have to build a franchise prototype. And the Now Habit was, you think that you have a procrastination problem, but really what you have is nothing to look forward to. And so because you have nothing to look forward to and you're looking at this task of work, there's no reason to jump into it now or later, because like you anticipate long slogs ahead of like grueling effort or stuff you don't want to do. So there's no backstop. So what the Now Habit was all about was creating an unschedule, which was a calendar where you only put fun activities on it, and you put a fun activity every day that you have something to look forward to, so that then you're getting your work done in between those fun periods. So there will be something fun. Like, you will not, like when you sit down to write that sales letter, the next 2 weeks of your life are not just going to be about that sales letter and nothing else, right? Like, you now have something to look forward to in your life. And I think that's really powerful. I know it has been for me, at least. It's kind of like, that idea of a vacation and getting all your work done before you go on vacation. I have something I'm looking forward to this weekend. Some people are flying in. And so like a whole bunch of stuff that hasn't gotten done is getting done right now, so that like I can feel good, because I could lie to myself last weekend that I would get it done, but I can't even lie to myself next weekend I'll get it done, because I know I'll be out having fun. So I think a lot of the mental game is also elements of that, like not being too hard on yourself, and also kind of trying to figure out like a game, like how can I make this whole thing more enjoyable.
I think that's huge. I think if the more you can kind of gamify your behavior and channel your, kind of the reward mechanism and channel it to things that maybe, you aren't as excited about, super powerful. Because that's essentially what you're doing. It's like, hey, I'm really excited about this. Can I kind of siphon off some of this excitement and just kind of use that as kind of energy to get through this thing. Even though I'm not excited about this thing, I have a lot of excitement just built up in general because of this activity happening this weekend or today or at the end of the month, whatever it is. You were saying before about the kind of push versus pull
Right.
motivation. And I know we've talked about this before, but just for people listening, because I think this is valuable for them. Like, how do you stay motivated at a certain point? Because what you said is true, which is at a certain point, there's less and less, it's diminishing value essentially. So the incremental kind of utility benefit of making another dollar decreases at a certain point. So it's like, hey, up until maybe, I think the magic number for it is like $75,000 a year. They've said like once you kind of make that, then if you make $76,000, it's really not adding any additional benefit happiness wise. So that's a really strong magnet for people getting started. If you're making 40,000 a year, 50,000 a year, like I want to get to here because I'm really struggling just to meet ends meet, like pay the bills and the basics. But like once you're done there, once there's no longer any real serious benefit coming from making more money or achieving a certain goal, everything beyond it's like nice. It's, hey, I can buy a fancier car, or I can buy another car, or I can buy a boat or a second house or a third house. It's like I don't need those things. It's no longer a matter of like if I don't do this, I'm living on the street or I'm starving or I don't have power, right? Like
Right.
how did you flip that switch in terms of staying motivated? Because I know you went through a period too where you
Yeah.
kind of lost motivation and then you kind of
Hmm.
found it again.
Well, one, I would say like the I think it's going to be different for each person. I
Yeah.
think that really what it comes down. I mean, some people are motivated by money. I mean, I know a lot of people that are motivated by money, and I think that if you're an entrepreneur, that's great because you should be motivated by money. I'm not, so okay. So that means that once I have enough, I can't. Getting more is not really that exciting to me. Not that I wouldn't do it, of course I would, but like, it wouldn't necessarily rise out of me my best effort in and of itself, just more. I think that that's where, when you look at I would imagine that well, what I would say is that I'm kind of like I'm going back and forth in my head
This is fine.
as I'm talking. Because what I was first going to say is that, you know, when you look at uh, Warren Buffett, or you look at people at the top of the game, right? Like they have so much money already, you would think that they're not doing it for the money. And you'd be partially right, right? For some of them, it is just a game, right? But for some of them, the money, the number is the game itself. Like, and I'm thinking about my girlfriend's clients, right, who are all billionaires, and how they live. And some of them, they're just chasing the next billion, and that's really like everything else could suffer in that pursuit, you know. And I imagine that you probably have a visual of a person I'm thinking about, and the visual couldn't be any further from what you're probably thinking of. I'm thinking of a 80-year-old woman who is all self-made, who's a billionaire, who doesn't have time to get a knee operation so that she can walk without being in pain because she's too busy trying to make her next billion. And it's like that's kind of crazy to me.
That is.
Um, but so for her, it's all about the number, and we don't really know if Buffett is about the number or about beating others, or what it is, right? Um, but I would say that that's where being in the right business, or trying to solve big problems on the behalf of your prospects, um, can be that thing, right? So I think we've talked about this, that I'm a huge fan of Werner Erhard, and that Werner created EST, he created Landmark, and really, you he really developed the coaching field, like one-on-one coaching, personal coaching, group coaching, all came from him. And one of the things that he talks about in a leadership course is that if you look at any great person, the natural inclination is to say, I'm not that. Like, that person is special.
Yeah.
But that person more often than not isn't special, but they are committed, like truly committed, to a cause that's bigger than themselves, that pulls greatness out of them, right? And so that, for me, that is the underlying thing, right? Like I want to make entrepreneurship easier. I want to make it more likely to end it with a successful outcome. Those kinds of things, and because of what entrepreneurship means to me, and those things give me a reason to do stuff, right? And so I would say that uh, that certainly is part of it for me. What happened for me though was, yeah, I was running away from stuff up until about like my mid 30s, late 30s, had already achieved everything that I wanted to achieve, like in my 40s and beyond. And so when I got to 40 and I wasn't happy, I didn't know what to do. And I didn't have anything to run away from yet. And I then really, the reason I took a bunch of time off was, one, I was not motivated, but two, I had the mistaken belief that maybe it was the thing I was doing and that I could find something else and I'd be really excited by that. What I came to realize was is that it had nothing to do with what I was doing. It had to do with how I perceived what I was doing, and that this thing that I had been doing for the last 20 years or 15 years at that time that had gotten me to this point didn't have to stay that thing. Like, okay, yeah, this is the thing that got me my wealth and I worked on it, but now that I'm here, I can make this into something else. Like it doesn't have to be that, if that makes sense. And I'm reminded of this one statement that I read in a book a gazillion years ago. No recollection of the book, and it's such a common saying, so I don't think it's that special. But it it is special, and it's something I always like. I wish I could tattoo it on the inside of my mind so that I could always remember it. And it is life is an internal experience that we mistake as an external one. And everything we do at the end of the day is for internal reasons. How we feel about ourselves, how we think others feel about us, whatever, right? Internal. But we play the game as if it was all external, right? Because the external like impacts the internal. um and so, yeah, in that moment, like my 5 years away, like I was thinking it was an external problem, it was really an internal problem. And right now I'm reading this. I picked up this book that was on my bookshelves for probably like 10 or 15 years. I don't know what motivated me to pick it up this morning and start reading it, but I did. And it's called like 10 Days to Self-Esteem or something like that, or 10 Steps to Self-Esteem or something like that. It's David Burns. And he had written some other books on cognitive behavioral therapy that I had read in the past. And it's interesting because he wants you in every step to kind of assess your life. It takes like 2 minutes, right? Like your overall level of happiness or depression, your anxiety levels, how things are in your relationships. And you know, when I first picked up the book, I think I was like feeling like I was like not in the best mental state. That's probably why I picked it up. And today's been a really good day. And so if I haven't had a chance yet to sit down and fill out that form that you're supposed to fill out each day, because I started reading it on the elliptical this morning. Um, but my answers would be very different now than they would have been this morning. And nothing in my real life has changed. Like, nothing in the external world has changed. It's just like how I'm perceiving things, right? And yeah, I forget that way too often.
It is interesting, like how how we let such seemingly in the grand scheme of things insignificant things dramatically alter our mood, our emotions, the way we're looking at the world, and the way we go about our day. It's and I've tried to put systems in place, and it's crazy even to do this. Like you have to put notes and write to yourself, and just like if you're thinking this way, think this way, right?
Right.
Like it's wild just how that can happen, and
Like memento, right? Like you're gonna wake up with tattoos on your arms, like
yeah, it's like our brain and just the way we've evolved is very interesting. The fact that we can't, like, even if we tell ourselves a million times to not think a certain way or not let something change the way we view another thing, we still, in that moment when it happens, it can change, right? It can change the way you look at your day, the way you look at your week, the way you look at your month. And that's been one of the, for me at least, one of the biggest things I've had to work on personally over the last year is like changing how much I let business and what I do career wise impact my overall like mental health and my overall well being day to day. Because it can be like you have a bad day like with performance with your ad campaigns and stuff like that, and I can just torpedo my entire day or days because of that. And it's stupid. Like it's so stupid. It's so insignificant because it's just a thing, right? It's just one ad account. It's just a business. Like it's not going to change who I am. It's not going to change like who I am as a person. It's not going to change the way I live my life. But I act as if it's the most important thing in the world. It's like the most significant thing in the world. The worst thing in the world that could have happened. It's like, no, is it really? Has it really changed anything other than the way, like you said, the way I view what's going on? Like from the outside world, like that. Last thing I'll say is that way of framing it, like internal versus external.
Right.
A lot of these problems, to everyone else, everything else seems normal. Like if everyone else is just kind of looking at you and looking at what's going on, it's like, well, nothing's changed. Everything's still going well. It's only because you're viewing it that way and letting it change the way that you view everything and act. It is crazy, like that continues to happen no matter how much you fight it.
Yeah, I mean, it's like if I step on the scale and I see one number, like I feel thin. If I see another number, I feel fat. I'm the same person that day, like, right? Like, so it's kind of hilarious. And yet I had this, but I was thinking about this when we were just texting back and forth, like, hey, what should we talk about? And this kind of relates to that, right? Because I believe that everyone that's hearing what we're talking about can identify what we're talking about, because this is one of those, this is being human, and everybody uh, experiences challenges in these areas. That's what being part of being human is. And I was watching the debate last night. Don't know if you did or
I
not.
did, yeah.
Okay. And I was thinking about like that there is probably no place on the political spectrum, right, that I couldn't have wound up in had I had different experiences. That, like, there is, you know, like when I look over at the other side of the aisle, right, that to think that those people are stupid or they don't get it or how could they ever believe these idiotic things from my perspective, um, recognizing that that is really just a perspective that I evolved to over the experiences I've had. And if I had very different experiences, I could be sitting on the complete opposite side thinking that about my current self, right? And I think that, like, I was thinking about that, and I really do believe that. I really do believe that, like, I could be all Antifa, I could be all Black Lives Matter, I could be all these things. Like, just depends on who I'm surrounded with, what they believe, what I get exposed to, etc. And I think you kind of like, at least I feel that way about myself. And I feel like that feeling about myself is one of the things that makes me a good marketer. Because I think that the only difference between me and this political enemy, right, like someone who is polar opposite of me on every single thing, there is nothing different about us as humans. What's different is what we've been exposed to, the inferences and beliefs that we've developed based on what we've been exposed to, and the conclusion that those beliefs have led us to. And when you recognize that about yourself, that then opens the door to be a better marketer, because like you get it. you get that anyone can be led to any conclusion. Now the question is, like, as a marketer, how do we lead this group of people to the conclusion of buying your thing? But at the end of the day, recognizing that we're all uh, insanely influenced by our context and et cetera, and what we come across, is a good way of thinking about things. And it's probably one of the reasons why, like, I don't get so bent out of shape when it comes to politics, even though I do feel very strongly about my beliefs. Um, I do recognize that it's just context.
It, it is fascinating. Yeah, I watched the debate last night, and it was interesting to to say the least.
Interesting to say the
Um,
least.
but it is fascinating. Like being in the political space, it's been weird the last few years because we're in the political space purely
Right.
from a capitalism perspective, like not from a social perspective. And so it's a weird dynamic where we're just doing it because it's an opportunity and there's consumers that want our products. We have great products. People want them, right? And that's the extent of it. We get to observe the communication. We get to observe the vitriol and everything happening. And it is important, I think, for people to remember what you just said, which is we all kind of start as blank slates. Like nobody comes out day one. Like my son's not going to be born and come out of the womb and say, I'm voting for Trump or Biden, right? Like it's not going to happen, right? It's a totally blank slate. And the prime example of that is if there was actual anything beyond just influence of opinion, and if there was any like actual, like both sides believe that they're factually right, both sides believe that their viewpoint is actually correct, and that just it's not possible because if it was possible, you would have you wouldn't have identical people be on opposite ends, right? Like if it was 100% factual that voting Republican was the best thing for somebody that's wealthy that runs a business and has X employees, you wouldn't then have people that match that vote Democrat and vice versa, right? It's so you can have two billionaires that are both worth $1.2 billion that both run companies with 500 employees that both pay the
Right.
same salaries and they operate in the same states and both can view politics totally differently. One can be on the far left, one can be on the far right. There can be one that's down the center, right? And I think the problem I see, and it's great for marketers, like learning that and understanding how people develop their opinions and beliefs is about as great a school you can go to in terms of learning. Um,
Yeah.
but what's slightly disconcerting is how technology has evolved to eliminate any type of middle ground or communication. And that's where things get interesting with how it's almost like we're on this exponential growth curve of influence for people on either side. Because it used to be, you would, if you wanted to learn about something, what happened with the debate last night, you would probably at a few news stations, you maybe had, pick up the newspaper and you would talk to friends at, social gatherings or whatever it is. Now you got Twitter, you have instant communication. Everybody has an opinion. Everybody has their viewpoint. Every piece of content is automatically clipped up and edited and positioned in a way. And if you're on one side or the other, these algorithms have gotten really good at delivering what you want. And so you see what the systems think you would respond best to, which is going to be what you already believe in. And so it builds on itself. So you get some momentum where maybe you're over here a little bit, maybe you're over here a little bit. And then it just really, if you're not aware of it, can pull you very, very fast into one direction. It's almost like kind of going on rapids where it starts kind of slow. And then all of a sudden you're category 5 going very, very fast. And I don't know where that ends. Like, I don't know how we solve that because there's no middle ground anymore. There's like, and the prime example of this is I did a presentation this morning with my friend Deepesh, and he's doing a big online summit, and so I did an hour presentation with him. And in the presentation, stuff that I shared was from our Proud Patriots brand, right? Which is a business, right? We sell collectible currency, which, yeah, there's some conservative stuff, but there's also a lot of it is just like Space Force, military coins,
Right.
just collectibles, right? And in the group after, Depeche posted, what did you guys think of the presentation? And a lot of positive stuff, but one woman posted, as soon as I heard that he ran ads for this, I was disgusted and instantly like turned it off. And like another woman chimed in and said the same thing. And listen, you're entitled to your opinion. That's totally fine. If you don't want to like buy the entire replay for the entire program with amazing marketers because of that, like just I'd rather him just remove my stuff. So I don't care.
Right.
But like that's where we've gotten to, where it's like, hey, I disagree. I wouldn't do that. I don't like that. But it's like this belief that if somebody disagrees with you, they are inherently bad or wrong and you are factually correct. That's a very interesting place because neither side, and I'm pretty apolitical, I'm pretty down the middle, like neither side is factually correct. They can be right in certain times, they can be wrong in certain times. And the lack of understanding that is super dangerous. And I don't know where this goes. Like I don't see it like ending. I don't see there's like a positive, this rainbow world where everyone is happy and everything is utopia. I see it ending pretty badly at some point.
Yeah, me too. I actually, if you don't mind, I'll read you something. I started working on like sometimes when I'm trying to like get clear on what I'm thinking about something, I'll write. And so I started writing this essay. I don't think it's ever going to see the light of day because most don't. But I was writing about this exact thing, right? And so here's what I wrote. I said, and it's related actually to a bunch of stuff we were talking about. All right. Let's see. Okay. I feel what others feel, maybe more strongly than most. I never considered my empathy a liability. Why would I? Tapping into the emotions of my prospects, clients, and my marketplace enables me to earn a good living as one of the top marketers of the current era. In fact, until now, if you pressed me, I'd have a hard time identifying any downside whatsoever to feeling what others feel more strongly than most. Yet now the feelings of others haunt me. I wake up to the feelings of apathy all around me. I log into a world with anxiety lurking loudly below the surface. I check my emails and messages only to be greeted with a hidden subtext of concern within every email message and Zoom call. Hours of heaviness is what I feel from others each day, all day. Finally, the day is done, evening comes, and yet there's no relief. Recognizing all my sources of information and entertainment have become polluted by politics, I no longer spend my evenings consuming news about the world, surfing social media, or being entertained by today's TV. Uh, Normally, enjoying this freed up time from screen sucking would be easy. Yet, with other people still either confined to their homes or choosing to stay there, enjoying social time with my newfound free time requires more planning and therefore hasn't happened as frequently as I'd like. In the beginning, I figured this time of forced isolation wouldn't be all too bad. In fact, I could make the best of it. I decided to focus inward. As for the first few months, there was enough outstanding tasks, home projects, and personal goals to keep me all well occupied. I organized my files, cleaned my workspace, caught up on my reading, cleaned out my and organized my closet. But the 15 days to flatten the curve turned into 6 months, and then there's still no end in sight. And what's become obvious to me, and I hope to you is, and this was the part that you were, I think, talking to, is we have an information problem. When you look at everything that's happened recently and how differently it's being portrayed from each and every mainstream source, both online and offline, we can't avoid recognizing the startling truth. The combination of the pandemic, the forced lockdown, the ongoing cyber war competing for clicks, the never ending media war competing for eyeballs, and the upcoming election during the most divided times in recent history have all collided together to create an ongoing propaganda echo chamber that surrounds each and every one of us. Yet many of our fellow Americans don't realize this sad truth. Many of our fellow countrymen don't realize that they are each personally surrounded by a propaganda echo chamber of their own making, built upon each and every one of their searches, clicks, listens, views, likes, etc. They only see what the algorithms determine will intensify their current emotions and therefore stir up their desired actions. It's mental warfare directed at us from all sides, from untraceable sources that are impossible to avoid. Listen, this is vitally important. I don't care where you live, what you do for a living, whether you believe in God or not, if you're male or female or anything else, progressive, conservative, independent, or something else. We must remember and believe with every fiber of our being this, that there is far more that unites us than there is that divides us. The websites will the websites we go to, the shows we watch, and the news we consume are all guilty of showing all of us only a small percentage of the population who organize their actions to influence the radical side that lives within each and every one of us. What we see, hear, and read leads us to the mistaken conclusion that what the organized fringe has acted out is what the masses think on the other side, creating an illusion that infects each and every one of our personally curated information bubbles, leading each of us to fall victim of the polarizing perspective that everything and everyone is more divided than ever before. It's easy to understand the impact of this, and then I'll go on, right? But like that's really the deal, like that we see something and we assume that like that's the truth and that everyone on the other side disagrees and they're doing all these crazy things when it could be like 20 people, right?
Yeah.
Like if I watch Fox News, there are horrible riots all over the place, and CNN is calling them peaceful, mostly peaceful protests with like fires behind them. If I watch CNN, they're telling me that it's all very contained, and Fox News is the one that's making a big nothing out of a big thing out of nothing.
Yeah.
So you got people on the left who assume that it's all made up, and Trump is just trying to send in like the G-men to take control of these cities for his coup or whatever. And if you're on the right, you think that like Antifa is burning down this country and everything's horrible and blah blah blah, right? And
Yeah.
what people don't get, and this is the big thing, is that there is no water cooler anymore. There is no place to hear you know, the there is no place to hear like collective conversation that might disagree with you. And you know, there certainly is. I remember I read this book like a couple years ago called Weapons of Math Destruction, and it was all about algorithms and
Hmm.
how algorithms can be really used for negative things. And there was this one case where it's like we have the ability, and when I say we, I don't mean like here in my office, but humanity has the ability to be able to determine whether a Facebook user is about to go into a manic episode,
Yeah.
right? And when someone is manic, they have no concern for cost or consequence, right? Perfect time to bring someone out to Las Vegas for gambling, right? So is it's not illegal, right? Where do we draw the line there? Like, would it be okay for casinos to target people who are about to have a manic episode and invite them, to their properties? Maybe, you know, tempt them to their properties with something that those people would want, right? Like, is that okay? And if YouTube has figured out that the best way to get you to stay and watch more videos is to intensify the emotions you have about those beliefs, so pull you further, right? You type in vegetarian and it wants to take you to vegan because like if you become a vegan, you'll be consuming a lot more media in your path to becoming vegan. Or, if you're a conservative, there's a lot more value in turning you into a white supremacist. And if you're a liberal, there's a lot more benefit in turning you into Antifa. So that's what these algorithms are doing. Not
Yeah.
intentionally, not to split us up, but what's going to
Well, that's what they were
send us
developed to do.
time
I
on the
mean,
platform.
that's the challenge is that a lot of these tools were built not with this malicious intent, right? When Facebook was developed and YouTube and all these, like, they weren't built, these algorithms weren't built to like, we want to divide the country and cause another civil war. It was, we want to assist people in finding things they find more relevant and sift through all the noise. Because if you think about before these things, like, it was a pain in the ass to find things that you wanted to find, right? Before search engines and stuff, like just finding basic information, let alone good information or information that you found valuable, was very, very time consuming. So there's so many benefits that come with these things. And that's everything technological. Like there are pros and cons, right? We all want to have, these tools for free, but we also don't want data to be shared with advertisers. Like, it's everyone wants all the good without any of the bad that comes with it. Um, and yeah, I mean, it's an interesting time. I think as a marketer, I've thought a lot about this, and I'm curious. I know we're running on the hour here, and this maybe is a question we dive into on another chat. But
Okay.
like, how do you even address the problem, right? Like, how do you convince somebody or persuade somebody who is on the left or on the right to vote differently? Like, that is the $1 trillion question, and I don't know how you do it in 2020. How you can swing somebody? I don't know how you can pull them out of that echo chamber and get them into this echo chamber essentially.
Well, I don't know that that's an interesting goal. I mean, yeah, we could talk about that. I wasn't thinking that that's where you were going to go. I was
But where do you think I was
thinking
going to go?
more.
Because we can
Where I
we can
thought you were
table
going to
that.
go was like, how do we just, how do we find common ground?
That's
Like,
good. Let's end. We'll end with
yeah.
that.
Well, if you haven't watched, The Social Dilemma
Yeah.
on Netflix, like people should watch that. I mean, I was exposed to a lot of all that stuff like a year prior and 2 years prior as I was doing research for AI and then also for the live stream that we had. I think that that's the big challenge because, like, let's assume, right, the algorithms are going to get even better. They're going to pull us even more apart, right? Like, we're going to see even less of the same thing, right? I remember, like, Joe Rogan talking about, like, on a podcast like a couple years ago that he was driving by whatever the big stadium is in LA. I don't even know, right? Um, and there was this person that he had never heard of that had sold out like 5 nights in a row, right?
Yeah.
Like that we live in this world today where like you could get on an elevator, you don't recognize the person across from you. As far as you're concerned, it's a nobody. And yet that person has 20 million fans spread out throughout the world, right? Like that, you know, just because they could be hugely famous, just not in your little bubble. Um, so it's the same thing. I think that I think we need to figure out, yeah, I think we need to figure out what's that one thing that puts us all back on the same page. And I had never read this book, and I really do want to read it. I'm gonna make myself a note on that. It's called Bowling Alone. It was written by Steve Pressfield. No, not Pressfield. Pressman. It's a sociology book, and what it's about is the impact of technology and how, like, I know this came from this book, but I haven't read it. That like look at what technology has done to us. It's brought us together and pulled us apart. Like there was a time when like TVs first came out that one person on the block had a TV and everybody came over to watch that TV with like at that person's house. It brought the whole community together, the whole neighborhood, the whole block, right? And then as technology evolved, right? Like now everybody has their own single TV in their house, but just one TV. And now the whole family watches television together, right? Now, like, everybody's got their own TV, right? Now it doesn't pull us together at all. It actually prevents us from coming together, right? And so technology, it's kind of interesting how technology can bring us closer and then pull us further away and then bring us closer. But the one thing that they talk about in the social dilemma, and this is something that I had read like yeah, like a couple years even prior, that the sad part is that we have the smartest minds on the planet, like these engineering like whizzes, right? Who like in any other time would be probably be working on tasks that would be somehow for the betterment of humanity.
Yeah.
And what these people are doing is all working on trying to make us more addicted to technology, more time on the screen, etc. We're fortunate, I guess, right? Like that we work in an industry that is only buoyed by that. Like it would be worse to be, if you and I were newspaper guys, because this would still be all going on, and we'd have like the fact like that the technology or the place where we are is not a rising tide, right? At least we're on the right side economically.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, I don't know what's going to happen. But then I wouldn't say that I feel really good about, like, I don't even know how long it's going to take for us to snap back to what was normal as of January, which is not that normal, but comparatively, like I don't, do you think we'll be back to where we were like in like January? Like, I want to do the live stream again, right? Like, will it be normal back like in February of next year? Like, will things be back to normal? Like, will flying on a plane be just like flying on a plane? Or like, is it going to be so much more than that?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it seems like we, take a few steps forward and then something happens, right? It's like I felt like we were making a lot of progress. It seemed like kind of it became less in your face on the news every
Right.
story, and then all of a sudden out of nowhere it was now like gloves are masks are no longer going to be effective and it's mutating like it seems like there's just something keeps happening. I don't know. I think based on how people continue, how the story continues to be driven and how things continue to evolve, yeah, I don't see like here in Florida, everything's like DeSantis basically said we're good to go, right? So it's everything
Right.
here is back to normal, but that doesn't mean that the national brands and stores are gonna change their policies. We drove by Trader Joe's, there was still a line in like a tent to get in there, and you still have to wear
Oh,
masks to get in places. Um, I don't know. I don't think we go back to normal. I think even if they said tomorrow that we're good, like things are good, we've changed behavior, right? We talk about this all the time, like how hard it is to change behavior both ways. So we've
right.
spent almost, a full year now living in this world where we have to make sure how many masks we have with us and we like good to go and we got to wear, mask everywhere we go. We wash our hands longer, multiple times with hand sanitizer. Like I don't see people just deciding like I'm going to go back to this way after they get the all clear. I think a lot of that behavior, how people socialize, how people are willing to take risks, like, hey, there's a big party happening, but even though the government said it's fine, like, I still don't want to go and socialize. I'd rather stay home. Like, I think that stuff's going to take even no matter when we get the all clear. I think that's going to take months, if not years, for people to start getting on the packed planes again, like masses getting into trains again, like going to they might open NFL stadiums up again or big concerts, but like are 50,000 people gonna go and pack a stadium? I don't think so. I think it's gonna take a long time to get back to where we were pre everything shutting down, just because of that behavior shift.
Yeah, I would agree. I definitely the offline world, right? The online world has been fantastic, and I guess that is kind of, we're lucky to be where we are,
Yeah.
right? And that, as entrepreneurs, like, I think I've shared this quote before. Jay Abraham said, most entrepreneurs fall in love with the wrong thing. They either fall in love with their business or they fall in love with their product, when really they should be falling in love with their customer. And, you know, and there's a, you know, that line of thinking is not original to Jay. I mean, that's, pretty common. But if you get that you're in the business of solving problems for your customers or prospects, um, then there will always be plenty of opportunity, especially online, as these changes happen, just because, like, we're in the right place. There are going to be problems. Problems are opportunities. Entrepreneurs are problem solvers who, get paid to solve problems. So I guess the horizon looks good for our professions. It, I just hope that the prognosis is as good for the world as it is for our professions.
Yeah. That's the big question is does the recovery and transformation apply to everybody and not just specific groups of people that happen to be in the right place? I think long term, yeah. I think there's always been this view historically of massive changes in like whole industries or pandemics or
Right.
wars. Like in the moment, it seems like whole groups of people are just going to be living on the streets, right? Whether it was,
Right.
Henry Ford, when you start to think about how many people were working in the horse and buggy industry and all this stuff. Like you think this whole industry is gone, but you can't see all of the jobs and opportunities that open up because of this new thing. Same thing with the internet, right? If you had told
Right.
somebody 30 years ago that, hey, 30 years from now, there is going to be a huge percent of people that all they do all day, their job, is they sit in front of these glass displays and they type on keyboards and input ones and zeros to make other things for other people on other glass screens to look at. Like people would think that's crazy, but that's, massive industry. Or even the financial markets, right? Like a lot of wealth is going to be developed by people that actually create nothing. They facilitate somebody selling a share to somebody else over here that wants to buy a share. Like, so I think there's a lot of stuff that's going to happen that we can't even see right now. That's going to open opportunities. It's a matter of people that are on the cusp of, in terms of their age, being able to adopt those skills and learn new skills fast enough and be reskilled and retrained. I think that's the group of people that are most at risk. I think if you're in your teens or 20s or 30s, like you're good. If you're in your 50s, 60s, verge of retiring, and you've gotten your 401k wiped out, and now you need to work, but all the stuff you used to do is no longer relevant, and there's these new industries, and you got to learn new skills. That becomes a little more challenging.
For sure. No, that it does. It's not the first time in our history where there's actually been more. There have been times of more profound change, um, but this will be a time of change. Like it was 80 years. I think it was something like that. Um, it's from one of my presentations. That's why I kind of know the number. I don't really remember it exactly, but um, we went from like 92%, and I'm making it up. I don't. It could be plus or minus a few, 5 or 6%, but let's say 92% of the population worked on farms, like here in the U.S.
Yep.
Uh, and then 80 years later, it was like 6%, right? So it was like 90% of the population went from working on farms to working in factories, and the whole life changed in every which way. I mean, from punching a clock at being at a certain time versus waking up like at the crack of dawn, like everything changed, right? And we're going to have those kinds of disruptions. There's no doubt, right? Like it's going to be a long time for commercial real estate to completely rebound, right? Especially office buildings. And what happens from there, I just think there's going to be tremendous change. And
Yeah.
because there's going to be tremendous change, there's going to be tremendous opportunity. And if you recognize that your customers and clients are going through as many changes as you are, maybe different, but as many, um, all those changes open up the possibility of opportunity for people like us
I love it.
to make a difference in their lives and profit, right?
I think we can end on a positive note there before we go down too deep into
Yeah.
the morbid, dark world ending
I'm
conversation.
gonna go
But
slip my wrist and
yeah,
go into the
just
bathtub now.
you'll never see me again. But I appreciate it, man. It's our conversations are always super fun. I always enjoy them. Getting to develop our friendship's been a highlight of my 2020, and I look forward to a lot more conversations. For Steel Art Winners, is there a link? Like, what's the place people should go just to check that out? Because that's an amazing program.
Be honest with you, I don't even know if I have a link yet. Have a cool little promo that your voice is in it.
Let's
The
share it.
Yeah, let's see. Can I pull it up? Can you do that in Skype? Let's see. Hold on.
Should be able to.
Yeah.
And I can get a
Let's
link.
see.
I can get a link from you when you do have it, because I think that the Steel Art Winners
Oh yeah.
program is amazing, and highly
Yeah. So I
recommend
can
everyone
get
check
you
it
a
out.
link. Yeah, that'd be awesome. I'll get you a link, and I'll get you the video too if you want to just throw it on the back of this. It's
Cool.
a 2-minute video.
Yep. We'll
Cool.
definitely do that.
All right, man.
Awesome. Well, appreciate it. And thanks everyone for hanging out with us today. We'll see you next week. Potentially, we're seeing, I'm in the baby zone right now. So we may be live next Thursday. If we aren't, it's because I'm a new dad, and we'll let you know the new schedule. All right. Thanks, guys. Have a good one.